Okay, you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Dan Nemiroff from SEPTA to discuss impending changes to the city's bus routes. And Jim Harity will also join us. He's council member elect at large. Denise Clay Murray will give us a preview of her weekly column that will be out in the Hall Monitor Weekly Dispatch this Friday. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Hi,
Lance, how
Lance.
are you doing?
I'm fine,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
Did I cut you off, Denise?
No, I was just saying hi, Lance.
I had to turn on my heater, so that's never particularly good news.
Yeah.
I expect a thank you note from PGW.
Yes. Well, you'll be waiting probably for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But Lance, you did you did an interview with SEPTA about the impending changes to the bus routes. Before we show the interview, can you tell us a little bit about what we're talking about here?
Well, our viewers who get our newsletter or email newsletter know that SEPTA is proposing to change everything. This is a whole new way of looking at SEPTA bus routes. And they're doing a 3-year process where they're meeting with people, talking with people. Most of it, as you'll hear, is over the internet. And they're going to redesign the entire system. They're going to do away with 16 bus lines, and they're going to add some bus lines in the suburbs. And what we were fortunate enough is to have someone from SEPTA, the project manager, agree to be interviewed. And we're going to show you that interview so people can get a better sense of what's going on. And towards the end of the interview, we're going to put down at the bottom of your screen the web page where you can get more information about what's going to happen to your bus, what's going to happen to your your trolley, your subway surface car, how much longer you're going to have to wait, or if you won't have to wait as long. And you'll get a sense of what actually happens to you. So here's the interview. Dan, the web page for SEPTA sounds very exciting. It says it's planning a bus revolution. Can you tell us what that means?
Sure. So Bus Revolution is SEPTA's first comprehensive redesign of its entire bus network. We've never done anything like it before. We've been running a bus network that stayed, pretty much the same for, since SEPTA was founded. And we're looking at all aspects of bus service, the routes, the stops, the schedules, where they go, how often they go there, and in the hopes of putting together a network that is more effective overall, that gets people further faster, that provides better connections, and is just generally increases ridership and ultimately works better overall for people.
The plans that are online say that SEPTA will be cutting 26 bus lines, and they'll be adding 10 motility on demand routes. Can you tell us which bus lines SEPTA is proposing to cut?
Well, I think so, and I think we're sharing the number. So I mean, we have to own this, but in reality, a lot of the routes that are being eliminated are sort of routes that are out in sort of far out parts of the region. They're low ridership routes. They're routes that run very infrequently. In many cases, they are being replaced by this sort of microtransit or on-demand service that we're proposing to stand up. In terms of some of the routes in the city that we're proposing for elimination, most of the time we are sort of pushing. We're adding, if we're eliminating a route, we're retaining one or two of the segments of the route and we're adding them to something else. So like one of the routes that we're eliminating or proposing to eliminate is the 47M, which is a one-way route that goes up 9th Street. Most of the people use the Route 47, so we would just take the service that's allocated for the Route 47M and push it to the 47, which is the preferred route, which is much higher ridership and much more frequent. We're also proposing to eliminate a route, the 89, which goes through Harrogate and Kensington and those areas. In many cases, we are assigning segments of that route to other routes, or it's already sharing a segment with a different route. So a lot of times it's situations like that. There are fewer routes overall, but in terms of overall access, we don't necessarily view it diminishing.
I appreciate that, but can you list the 26 bus lines you're going to be cutting?
Off the top of my head, we'd have to supply that in writing.
Okay.
I can't name them off the top of my
That'd
head.
be great. Is there someplace on the webpage where you have a list of which bus lines you're proposing to cut?
There's a lookup table that you could use, but I think it's probably easier for me to just send you a list.
Right. Thank you. I understand that you've been doing a lot of outreach.
Mhm.
Could you tell us a little bit about what the response has been like? How many people responded?
Yeah.
What it's like?
Sure. So we're doing different types of outreach. So obviously we have a project website, which you referenced, and we have a lot of information on our site, and we've gotten a lot of feedback through the site. We're supplementing, sort of those static things with virtual community conversations, which are generally scheduled for Monday nights. I know you were at the South Philly one.
Yes, which is where I live.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And I do ride two of the buses you're going to eliminate, or you're proposing to eliminate.
What are we eliminating?
The 27 and the 32.
Oh,
I have
see.
family in Roxborough and Madison. In
Yeah.
fact, my wife grew up in Roxborough.
Yeah.
So that's
no, I understand. We're rerouting them, not eliminating them.
so that's not exactly true.
Mhm.
I looked at that specifically, and the 27 and the 32 that come into South Philadelphia will be eliminated.
Well, the 32. Well, okay. Well, let's talk about the outreach first, then we can talk about this one specifically. Okay, so we're doing virtual community conversations, which are very they're focused geographically. So we did one on South Philly Monday night. We've had I think 4 of those so far, 4 or 5. And then we're having in-person open houses. So these are, we go to different community locations. We have posters set up. They're open house style. They're not presentation style. People come, they can talk to the technical team. They can talk to either SEPTA staff or consultants, ask questions, provide input. And then all of the input, whether it's in person or whether it's online, is being aggregated. And we're already reviewing the feedback that we're getting so that we can make adjustments based on that feedback.
So according to your table, you've
Mhm.
had most of the responses coming online. I'm
Mhm.
looking at a summary of your findings, and you say that 5,806 people have completed the survey online, and only 333 people have participated in person. Do you know the table I'm talking about from your webpage?
Yeah, I think that's referring to an older phase of the project, like a previous phase of the project. That's not where we are now. We haven't put any. We're only about halfway through this round of engagement, so we haven't put anything up on the site yet. We will, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. So
the information on your webpage is old.
It's older, yeah. We've done 2 rounds of public engagement already, Lance. So I'd have to. It's been a while since I looked at that. We can again, if you want to send a link, I'll tell you exactly when it's from. But the stats that you referenced, they sounds like it was from the first round of engagement that we did, which was in fall of 2021, and that was we got a lot of we did get a lot of survey responses, and then we did pop-up events at transportation centers where we would walk people through a series of questions, and the responses, the survey was kind of the same. We had to make it a little different for the in-person because you only had a couple minutes with people. But yeah, I think that sounds like what you're referring to. But where we are now in the process, I would say, I think in person, probably talked to about 500 people or so. And then online, we've gotten, probably over 1,000 comments at this point about the proposed network. But we're not doing a survey. We're just letting people provide feedback, through just, they send us an email. It's me on the other end of the email. We collect all the comments. We like I said, we've started to review them, and they'll obviously play into how we adjust the proposal.
Well, certainly COVID has made it much more difficult to get good information.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, for sure. Like, when we first started planning the engagement last year, we did want to do something that was a little more like what we're doing now, where in person, like kind of, old school like that. But it didn't, I think it was right around like Omicron. So nobody felt comfortable indoors. We were all wearing masks, that kind of thing. And
it's certainly been a challenging environment.
Yeah, no, it's sorry, go ahead.
What percentage of riders are you looking to get a response from before you consider it significant?
That's a really good question. We set a bar at the beginning of the process that was like, about 10,000 people, which is not a ton. And I think we're past it at this point, but I don't think there's like an adequate number. I do think that we've gotten enough feedback, and I think Monday was like a good example of this, where we kind of know how we have to address some of the changes in South Philly based off of that feedback. I do think the response we got was, I think it makes sense. We know we have to make some adjustments. We're doing as much as we can to get out to riders. We'd love to get up 25,000, 50,000. We set a bar of 10,000 at the beginning of the project, not knowing sort of where COVID would take us. But I think we need to do more.
Right. So statistically, wouldn't there be a number, a percentage of response that would be statistically significant? That's how pollsters work.
Yeah, no, there would be. We didn't set a percentage. We set a number. And we've done 2 different surveys. That has gotten probably around 8,000 or 9,000 responses. So,
and I'm assuming your consultants helped you with all this. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no.
Didn't
sorry,
they explain what number would be a significant statistical number versus just a roundup number?
No, we worked through it, and we worked through it with our own market research firm, with our market research department. And I may be misremembering, but no, we definitely set a bar of talking to 10,000 riders. It wasn't a percentage. But we are.
There's 650,000 bus riders that there were before COVID. Is that right?
Yes, about half as much now.
Right. So if we went for 1%, right, we would be at 6,500. So 10%. So at 10,000 would be less than 2% of the riders.
No, we need to do better. We know that. And,
right. No, I just want to get the numbers right. Pre-COVID, which is the number we hope to get back to as a society, right? We all hope to get up to at least 650,000 riders again. 10,000 would be 1.5% of the riders responding. So 98.5% would be shut out of the process. Is that correct?
I mean, they wouldn't have responded. That doesn't mean they weren't part of the process, I would say.
Okay. I also noted on the webpage that your consultants were very clear on the problems of the digital divide. I could read you what they wrote, but I'm guessing you already know. So they're saying that whatever survey they do and whatever meetings they hold are going to be significantly skewed by the digital divide. But I couldn't see how they were controlling for that. So I was hoping you could tell us how you control for that.
Well, I think you control for that. I mean, that was why during both phases of outreach thus far, we've done, when we did surveys, we had an in-person survey to go to correspond with the digital survey. It also has driven our, it's why you do face-to-face engagement. It's also why we do focus groups. It's also why we meet with, different community groups, both in person and virtually. So I think it's something that we're cognizant of and trying to control for. But we are meeting with people both online and in person, and making sure that when people request in-person meetings, we do so.
But so far, your responses have skewed very heavily towards online.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot more play online, and gotten a lot more feedback online. But when we do community meetings, obviously those are different, and we are aggregating all of that with the other comments too. And we are, when we review the survey responses, we do make sure that we sort of control them for our ridership. So we have a ridership that skews, there's more Black riders than white riders, there's more women riders than men riders. So we try to build that into our survey analysis too.
I noticed that your consultants say that they're providing for SEPTA synopsis of all the information you're collecting. I'm wondering if we can share that. What they write is, we'll also provide detailed written records of public feedback to SEPTA for every meeting we conduct and from every other touch point we have with the stakeholders during engagement activities.
Yeah, I mean, we
So
have.
I'm
Sorry, go ahead.
assuming they're doing. I'm assuming they're doing that. My
Yes.
question is, can we have access to that information?
I mean, we can share some of it. It would be, I mean, we've had thousands of meetings at this point, so that might be a challenge, but we can talk about how to get you more information.
Well, whatever you get to the board, could we get copies of that?
Oh, yeah, that's easy. Yeah.
Okay. How do we do that? And how can we find it online?
It is not, because the board has gotten, specific presentations, but we can share those lands.
Okay, thank you. At the South Philly meeting, you, I believe, said, not you, forgive me, the consultant said that the plan was to cut back on the number of buses that run up and down Broad Street.
Mm-hmm.
I'm old, so it used to be the C bus, now it's the 4 bus.
Yeah.
And it's going to change once again. I forget what number it's going to be. It's going to be a 5 something, right? So we go.
I mean, the numbers are placeholders now. Like we
Oh,
know we have to change some of them because we're gonna change the lettered routes, but we don't know what they'd be called ultimately at the end of the day. So we adopt, for internal purposes, we adopted a placeholder system, and we've just been using that for now.
But right now, the 4 bus runs more often than what the plan for the future calls for. And when she was asked about that, when the consultant was asked about that, she said anybody that doesn't want to wait can use the Broad Street line. And that was very troubling. Our neighborhood and many of our viewers and our riders skew older, and the Broad Street line is not accessible at every stop.
Right.
So I'm wondering how you could consider that an option for riders.
Well, I would say that, whatever we have running on Broad Street, at the end of the day, I think that it's likely to have, I know we talked a lot about this specifically in regards to the 45, but it'll have more peak frequency than the 30 max service it indicates. I think you're right, though, that the Broad Street line isn't an option for everybody. So, it's one of the reasons that we are providing the bus overlay, because we want to, but we will, based off of the feedback that we've gotten, we'll have to make some, we'll have to do some thinking about how to.
Right. So the subway surface cars, the Broad Street line are not as accessible as the buses.
Correct.
And while I understand SEPTA's moving in that direction, forgive me for being so blunt, it may take many years before every stop is accessible.
Yeah, and I think even if every stop was accessible, we would still provide, because they're far apart, so we would still provide bus service on top of it too.
So I just want to again put a place mark in that, saying we're going to increase, we're recommending increasing the wait time on the Broad Street bus that goes all the way up to North Philly and to Fern Rock. Saying if people don't want to wait, they can ride the Broad Street subway is not an acceptable answer.
Well, it's an option for most people. It's not an option for everybody, but it is, that is why we retain the bus service. And there's bus service on 2 blocks west, 2 blocks east. So there are lots of options. The options are remaining. They might not run as frequently, but that enables us to provide more frequency on other routes that expand connectivity in different directions. So that's like this is a project like this is zero sum. We're not, unfortunately, getting additional operating budget to just add service. That would be great, but we are looking at ways to sort of increase, people's ability to get to other locations, to increase how far they can get using the transit system. And that requires us to sort of rebalance how we provide that service.
Okay. I'm curious about the home and school meetings. As I'm sure you know, and most of our viewers know, SEPTA is also our school bus system. And there are certainly peaks for when the schools let out. In our magnet school system, Central, Masterman, Bodine, Kappa, Palumbo, all of them and many of the charter schools could not function without the SEPTA school bus system.
Right.
How is that taken into consideration in the plan?
Right. So that's a really good question. So like we collect data on everything. We know how many people use every bus, how many people use every trip. So some of it is built into the work that we've done already. As you pointed out, though, we are, proposing certain changes which would change some of those school trips. So part of what we have to do is figure out how much service we need to reassign, because we run different types of school service. We run school service that's built into schedules, and then we run school service like trippers that are specific for different schools. So those will remain. We're starting to put that in, and like I said before, we went out with a draft. We've gotten a lot of feedback. We've gotten enough feedback, I think, at this point to know that we have to make some changes, and some of that will just sort of come back in organically because of things that we want to do to make some to address people's concerns. But school service will remain. We're building that back into the proposal now, and we'll be out again publicly next spring, and we'll have all of that built into the plan.
In terms of where you are now, my understanding is this is now almost in the final stage, that you've done a preliminary recommendation, you've made revisions, and now you're making final revisions to bring forth to the SEPTA board for there to be public hearings. Is that correct?
I would say we have a lot of work left to do to get it into the form that we need it to be in. We're not going, so our goal is to start the hearing process next spring, but there will be public engagement before that hearing process. We're not just going to go right to hearing. Our goal is to get the network finished early next year, hopefully January, and then immediately start sharing it, immediately start doing whatever outreach we can do. And then in the probably April-May timeframe, we start hearings. The hearings we'll have an open house so that people can come, engage, and then we'll have the testimony part. But we have a lot of work to do until then, to get things to where we feel comfortable. I would say we're not quite in the final stage, but we're getting ready to enter that final stage.
Is there a threshold number of riders who object to a change for you to make reconsideration of that change?
I don't know if there's a threshold. I think that's an interesting question. I think that riders the riders know the system and have pointed out, quite a few issues with what we've presented. I think that there are issues that are easy to rectify. If it's like a scheduling thing or something like that. Some that are harder because it's part of like a group of changes. So I think that depends on the situation. I know that that's not a great answer, but I think that, we've gotten a lot of feedback from specific areas of the city. We're not surprised that we particularly got a lot of feedback from those areas, and so we need to rework those a bit. There's not a number. I do think it depends on the route. It depends on the scale of the change. It depends on how tied it is to other changes. You know what I'm saying?
I understand it's very difficult, and
Yeah.
I think the difficulty is compounded because you're taking away from my route, and I don't know what's going to replace it. I can't envision it. All I know is I'm losing something, and it's very hard for me to see what I'm gaining.
No, and that's fair.
So one of the things I'm curious about is, do your consultants ride the buses that they recommend be eliminated to ask the riders on those buses, will the change that the consultants are recommending work?
So our consultants are not worked on these projects all over the country. The network changes were planned in conjunction with SEPTA staff, many of whom are bus riders.
Sure.
So
But does anyone actually get on the bus? Like, does anyone ride the 45, which is the old 23?
Mhm.
Does anyone who says it doesn't have to run as often as it's running
Yeah,
now? Does anyone get on the bus and actually ask the riders what they think of that idea?
We do a lot of survey work. We don't ask people on the buses but that's a good idea. Maybe we should do that. But no,
I know we're running out of time, so I would like to give you a chance just to talk. But if you could answer one more question.
Sure.
Could you tell people how they can make sure their voice is heard if they have concerns? Or if they like the ideas that you're proposing, how they can make sure you hear that as well? Because often it's easier to be against something than it is to be for something new.
No, and that's true. And thank you for asking that and giving me the opportunity. So the best thing for people to do, I mean, ideally they can come to either a virtual event or an open house. However, they don't need to. People have busy schedules. We don't, they don't need to do that. If they want to provide any input whatsoever, it's busnetwork@septa.org.
So we're going to run that at the bottom of our screen tonight.
That would be beautiful. Thank you.
Larry's our project manager. Larry, if you can make sure that works, that'd be great. And with SEPTA's permission, we'd also like in our next weekly email to include this information so that people know how they can be heard, know about the meeting at 1234 Market or wherever it is. Is that something that you can approve?
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. And that's the best way. I am on the other side of the email address. I make sure everything is binned appropriately. We are starting to review the comments, but people have plenty of time to provide feedback. So, we are not, there's no suggestions that are not being, sort of consolidated and aggregated and reviewed. Every comment we get will be aggregated. We will be providing a summary of those comments at some point over the next month. I don't know exactly when, but we have started to kind of put that into shape so that people know generally what the response has been, positive or negative, big or small. It's busnetwork@septa.org.
I really appreciate your time. I'm going to now say, is there anything that you were hoping to get across that I missed?
No. I mean, I want to be very clear with people that, this is a process that is iterative. We're really interested in what people have to say. There's things in the new network that we know are really different than in the proposed network, the draft, that are different from the current than the way we run things now. We do feel like we have to make some changes in the way we run our buses. But we're open to suggestions, and we're happy to talk to people further if they're so inclined. But no, I appreciate the time today, Lance.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on Hall Monitor, and thank you to our viewers for joining us this evening. Dan, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Have a good day.
All right, we would like to thank Dan Nemiroff from SEPTA for joining us and having that discussion with us. Lance, what stood out in that discussion for you?
I think that we really don't know yet how good or how bad the changes will be. And I was disappointed that the consultants who are making the recommendations don't get on the bus and talk to the riders. So my understanding of what they're saying is when they eliminate a bus line, they're going to have another bus line to take its place. I think it would be very helpful and instructive to get on the bus they're going to eliminate and say to the riders, we're going to eliminate your bus, and instead you'll be able to use this bus. Will that serve your purposes? And I think that's a much better way of understanding what's happening than using the internet or using surveys. It's also the people doing the work don't have the ability to address the number one issue, which is safety. And that's a disappointment. But that's really not the people who are doing the work. That's the SEPTA board. You would think with the shootings on the Broad Street line, with all of the gun violence, with the mayor of Philadelphia saying it's his number one priority for the rest of his term, that the SEPTA board would instruct the surveys to talk about what do we do to make it safer. And the board has yet to do that. So that's a major disappointment.
Well, I think that probably the reason for that is that the board isn't in any position to be on SEPTA in the first place. I mean, most of these folks are from the suburbs. And if nothing else, they've made it abundantly clear that what the city needs in terms of routes, in terms of funding, in terms of a great many things, isn't their priority. So the fact that they're not taking that into consideration isn't much of a surprise. Now, as somebody who rides SEPTA pretty regularly, not as regularly as I used to, but regularly enough, I still remember when they split the C route into the 4 and the 16. That was supposed to make service more efficient. That was supposed to provide more service and different things. And what it did was the opposite. You now have 2 buses that take forever and a day to come. So I have to agree with you, Lance, when you ask, what do we actually gain from what we're losing here?
And I'm hoping that people will attend the hearings, attend the public meetings, attend the Zoom meetings, and make it clear what they're hoping for, what they want, and whether what the proposals are will serve their purposes. The other part that was missing was we have changed our zoning laws to allow for developers to build without parking spaces, in large part because of our public transit system. The example I'm going to use is from Broadmoor, Washington. At Broadmoor, Washington, Tower and Mr. Bladstein are building a massive project. And they're not going to supply many parking spaces because SEPTA ran the 3 buses from there up and through the center city into Roxborough, Mattiunk, into North Philly, and all the way to Fern Rock. And so they were able to get an agreement that they don't have to build parking spaces because people wouldn't need cars. They could ride SEPTA. And now SEPTA is undermining that transit development by eliminating those very buses that the developers were touting as a reason why they didn't need parking spaces. Unfortunately, it seems like one hand's not talking to the other. If we do like transit development, then we should demand that the service that was there when we were planning the development stay there. And I think that, again, is not the people who are redesigning the system's fault. That's the mayor's fault. That's the developer's fault. That is not looking at an integrated, holistic picture. But of course, it affects the riders very badly. So if you put 3,000 new apartments on the Broad Street line and you cut back on the bus service, all you can imagine is the people who are well enough off are going to use cars or Uber or Lyft, and the people who are struggling economically are going to be stuck on overcrowded buses, and the few people who still have cars will never be able to find parking spaces. Denise points out how difficult it is to raise these issues because the SEPTA board is controlled by the suburban interests. Philadelphia City is 80% of the system, and we have less than 17% of the representation on the SEPTA board. So it's a challenge, but I do believe riders showing up will make a difference. If their voice is heard, it will make a difference. And we're going to reach out to some of the candidates running for mayor in the future and ask them what they think about it. And again, transit development is at the core of some of our major developments in the city, whether it's around Temple, whether it's in North Philly, whether it's in Strawberry Mansion or in South Philly. It can't work unless the transit is there. Transit development without transit is really pointless.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for that. And we're going to have more information in our newsletter that's going to direct people where to go to find this information and how to participate. So we're looking forward to that too. Thank you so much.
And I would really like to thank Dan and his team for being so forthcoming. This is an example, in my opinion, of what SEPTA should be doing. I think it's great that they're coming out, they're holding meetings, they're doing what they can, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to have them, and we're going to have them back again. Invite them back again anyway as this process moves forward. So the next thing we'd like to show for you is we did an interview with Council Member-elect Jim Harity. The one thing I will tell you, it's a great interview, but there was a little bit of technical issues that come up from time to time. I think you'll get the gist of it. I think overall it's okay, but it did cut out here and there. But this is our interview with Council Member-elect Jim Harity. All right, Mr. Harity, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Lawrence. Thank you for reaching out.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I started out, I was born in South Philadelphia. About third grade, we moved to Southwest Philadelphia, went to St. Barney's Middle School, bounced around high school a little bit until before finally dropped out to go to work. Realized I wasn't going to work. Went to community college and got my GED. I worked at a lot of different places when I was younger, till I found a way into the union. I'm a union laborer for the last 23 years, off and on. I got 23, but probably only about 8 working, because I've always been in government jobs, off and on. My first job, investigated fraud against the city, mostly contractors illegally dumping residency cases for city employees, so on and so forth. From there, I went to the Philadelphia Sheriff's Department as the labor relations liaison. I basically handled all the strikes. So, we had 2 units, one that went out and arrested them when they needed to be arrested, and one that went out and negotiated peace so that we didn't have any broken windows or overturned vehicles or anything like that. And then from there, I was appointed deputy managing director in the street administration, worked on the NTI program. And from there, I went back to my union, worked out on the job for another couple of years, before Senator Street called me out of retirement to help in his campaign for the state Senate. Then he ran for state Senate. I was his special assistant for 2 years and then became his executive director or chief of staff. We didn't use the title chief of staff. And from there, Senator won the chairman spot of the state party, and I went to work as the political director for the last 6 months there, and we had some big victories, as you can tell, in the state. We won every seat, flipped the House. I guess I could take a little bow for that because I was on the team. It was a definite team effort, and under Senator Street's leadership, we just seemed to soar above.
Now, that is one of the more extensive resumes I've ever heard from anybody, not just somebody running for office or just being recently elected office. How do all those different things in your background prepare you to be a member of city council?
Well, the bottom line is, I'm not going in there as a normal freshman who doesn't know anybody and has to feel his way around. I've worked in many departments, as we just said, in the city. I know how the budget works. I know how all that stuff goes on. I've assembled a very young, energetic team that's going to come in with me to see what we can do so we can get some new ideas in there. I believe that this is going to be a monument to the city of Philadelphia. We have a lot of issues going on right now that need to be addressed, not to mention schools, jobs, and crime, which are going to be my 3 biggest platforms. I want to build new schools for our kids, give them a sense of pride, give them a sense of belonging. They're supposed to feel safe at school. We need to make that happen.
So can you give us a little bit more on those priorities? When we talk about getting more funding for schools, what does that look like? Because really it comes down to revenue, right? So how do we generate more revenue? How do we start getting more money to those schools, and at the same time work on the other things you had mentioned, the crime issue as well?
Well, with me, we'll see what happens on the state level. Working for the senator, we've been trying to legalize marijuana for years now. I'm a big proponent. If we're going to legalize it, then we should use it to help some people. I would like it to be used to build new schools. I listen to the news a lot at KYW because I'm traveling the state as the political director during the campaign season. And the other day, they were talking about how happy the kids were in Jersey because they were getting new smart boards. Our kids would be happy. They don't even know what a smart board is. we got an education problem here in Philadelphia, which turns out to be a crime problem. If you have, this isn't rocket science. If you have bad schools and no jobs, it equals crime. We have to give people a reason to believe again in their politicians, that we are supposed to be there fighting for them. And that's what I plan on doing. I plan on going in there every day with the attitude of what can I get for Philadelphia kids today? And go from there.
So with that in mind, with your connections in Harrisburg, Harrisburg's sitting on close to what, a $12 billion budget surplus right now. Do you
Absolutely.
think one of your primary goals is going to be able to get some of that money here for Philadelphia?
Sorry, somebody was cutting on my phone. Could you?
Okay, so Harrisburg is sitting on a $12 billion budget surplus right now. Are one of your key goals going to be to get some of that money here for Philadelphia?
Oh, absolutely. We were able to get another 1.7 billion bought down. The senators got it. So, I mean, that won't all come to Philadelphia, but it was put back into education budget, which was a big jump, a big lead. I think we need to figure out ways, and some of it may not even be just getting new money. It may be figuring out what they're using the money they're getting already for, and finding better ways to reuse it. I was happy to see that the new superintendent, one of his top priorities was redoing the schools, rebuilding. I believe that's what needs to happen in Philadelphia. We need to start with education, which will create more jobs for us, which will then bring the crime rate down. We got a lot of kids killing kids. There's almost 160 kids under the age of 16, I believe the number is, already killed this year. And that's not even a crazy number. A lot of them were killed by kids under the age of 16. Our children don't know how to talk to each other anymore. And I believe that's a direct correlation from money that was cut years ago from the Corbett budget. If we studied it, we'd find a direct link to that. Now that we have put it back over the last 8 years, and as I just said, we put more money in there, but we need to do better. It needs to be better managed. We need to keep kids from dropping out. These are all things that tolerate into crime. Education, I believe, is a key.
Okay, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, Mr. Harity, and congratulations on being our newest member of City Council.
Well, thank you, Denise. I appreciate you guys.
Well, I guess my question is, I as part of my research on you, I was
I'm sorry, my phone blacked out again. Can you?
Sure. As part of my research on you for this interview, I read a Q&A you did with Axios. And one of the things that you talked about was making L&I hearings public. Like, I didn't know that they weren't public to begin with.
No, I said I would hold public on L&I.
Okay.
As I've been traveling around the city, a lot of the complaints I've been getting have been L&I issues on a variety of different things, having houses sealed up, just issues with redundancy and permits, where you have to have one permit, but then you also have to get another permit in order for that permit to be okay. Which is all fine and dandy, but we need to streamline it so people can have easier access to L&I and make it and maybe rethink some of the permits we have that are redundant and combining them. People aren't as upset about paying the fees that they have to pay for permits as much as they are of wasting their time, where they go and get a permit, think they have everything they need, and then are told they need this other permit for that permit to be good. So then they have to go down and waste another day down there in L&I. I don't know if you've ever been down there, but you could sit there a long time.
So, as someone who has worked mostly on the state level with Senator Street and as the political director of the Democratic Party. What do you feel you would be able to bring to City Council to better have them better understand the relationship between the city and the state?
Well, I think I would bring a unique perspective since I've worked for both. I know how it works up in the state. One of the committees I'm going to ask to be on is the Intergovernmental Committee, which is basically the go-between between the state House and the state Senate and the City Council of Philadelphia. And as you know, most of our money comes. So I'd like to be one of the people that goes up to talk to them. I have relationships that I've built over the last 6 years with the state reps and the council people, from not only being in the Senate, but now also as the political director. I think I'd be an asset on that committee, and I think I'd be able to help bring more money back to the city of Philadelphia.
Okay, now gun violence is something that has been the center of a lot of discussions when it comes to city council. I mean, you look at what's going on, and you've mentioned education as something that you think could, kind of calm that problem down. But do you see anything else that you might be suggesting to the folks on council in terms of solving the gun violence problem or coming close to solving the gun violence problem?
We need more safe places. For years we've been closing rec centers and cutting programs to kids. And they have no place to go. So they merangle around the neighborhood doing whatever they're doing. And they're good kids. We just got to give them. When I was a kid, I had all kinds of mentors in the form of coaches. But, nowadays I have a 13-year-old at home that's about 300 pounds, and he wants nothing to do with sports. But he can work a computer like nobody's business. So what we need to do is maybe rethink the rec centers and start putting more computer labs in the rec centers also, besides basketball and football and baseball. Maybe we need more computer labs. Let's teach these kids what they're interested in, which is video games. Let's show them how to make video games. I'm sure we could find volunteers that come in and help at the rec centers that could teach these kids how to program. I'd also like to put maybe some recording studios in there. Let them learn how to get it out in words. That's what's going on here. Our children aren't able to communicate with each other. And I think it's just a myriad of things. The 2 years hiatus with COVID didn't help their social skills. This failing school system doesn't help. I heard some crazy numbers the other day where about 60% or so of 8th grade students in the public school system are reading at a 2nd grade level. That's unacceptable. We need to learn. We need to teach our kids that there's other things for them to be doing besides getting in trouble, and teach them in a way that they're. And as far as the gun violence problem, I mean, I deal with that every day. I live in Kensington, and 9 people were literally shot at no farther than a block from my house the other day in that mass shooting. It's something that the kids in my neighborhood deal with every day. It's part of the trauma that's affecting them every day. And, but that's not all. You hear about the big stuff, but I had a woman shot 6 times in the face on the corner of my block. With all the kids outside. It was just a horrible experience, and the kids see this, and it's not good. We're desensitizing them to violence, and that's not a good situation.
Now, was that part of your motivation to run for this office? The fact that you saw this going on in your neighborhood and you said somebody's got to do something, and that somebody should be me?
I did 5 or 6 kids sitting on my step. I have tools, so they know that. And they all have bikes that are pretty banged up. So I spent an hour or so helping them fix their bikes, giving them the hour keys, showing them how to do it. And I talked to them. And these are good kids. They're not bad kids. Everybody talks about bad home life. Kids don't know what a bad home life is. They just know it's home. That's where mom is. That's where dad is. That's where their brothers and sisters. It's the trauma they hear and see outside. And what got me was one day I was out there helping them fix their bikes. And I don't know if you remember, there was a guy walking his kid to school. school, and for whatever reason, a bunch of people came over and they assassinated him, and they didn't want any witnesses, so they killed his 9-year-old kid. Upsets me. But the bottom line was they asked me about that, and I did. So the only thing I could think of was who's going to protect these kids, and nobody else was doing it in my neighborhood. So I decided that it was mine to get up and do it. I never thought that I would run for office. I had no intentions of doing it. I was perfectly fine being the second man. You know what I mean? I get a little emotional, so that's why I'm good at being behind the scenes. Your emotions don't get shown there. But I think it's time for somebody with emotions to be up there, because I'm pissed off. We're losing our kids, and I don't understand why more people aren't as bad as I am. We need to do something about these ghost guns. We need to do something about this opioid crisis. It's just a whole whirlwind of things. And, everybody talks about the neighborhood I came from and where I'm at, but there's little Kensingtons, as I call them, all over the city. You got them in South Philly, around 7th and 8th Street, walking around like zombies. They don't know where they're at. That's all for them. We need more mental health people out there on the streets trying to get these people. I'm in recovery. We need somebody to get them when they're having that moment of clarity, when they're sitting out there and they're cold and they're thinking to themselves, I don't have to live like that. That's why we need people on the streets to be doing that work. And that's why I'm a part of One Day at a Time.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn, our co-host, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
Okay. Mr. Hardy, just the last thing I wanted to ask you about, when do you... We ran out of time there. We'd like to thank Mr. Hardy for being with us. We apologize for cutting in and out, but we're glad we were able to speak with him. And we'll be following his tenure on City Council with great interest. Now, Denise, where were you yesterday?
Oh, yesterday, and the irony of where I was yesterday is that last night, Donald Trump, the former president and orchestrator of the January 6th insurrection, announced that he was running for president again in 2024. Now, why does that connect to where I was yesterday? Because yesterday I was at what is being called the Democracy Summit at at Howard University, one of the nation's oldest historically Black colleges. It was the first event by the Center for Democracy and Journalism, which is run by Nicole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times. For those of you who don't know who she is, she's the author of the book, The 1619 Project, which makes the argument that while we view America as starting in 1776 with the Revolutionary War, where it actually started was in 1619 when the first slaves were brought to Virginia and dumped on our nation's shores. One of among the things they talked about at this symposium, which was really full of awesome stuff, and what I'll do is I will send you the link, and maybe we can send it out as part of the newsletter for this week, because that's what I'm going to be writing my column about. There was a lot of great information that kind of talks about why some of the folks that are acting some of our political actors are acting the way they are. And a lot of it is based on a perception that, people who think that they're about to be obliterated, or who think they're about to be replaced, tend to act in ways that are anti-democratic. In fact, the gentleman and I'll be mentioning this in the column as well, that was speaking about his book, When Democracies Die, said that because Trump is able to run for president again, we have a lower democracy score in America than several Latin American dictatorships, because in those dictatorships, you're not allowed to run for office if you have fomented a coup. Yet we haven't, we don't have that same restriction. So I'll be talking about what I learned at this conference, some of the things that I saw, some of the people I interacted with, some of the people I talked to, and some of them I'm reaching out to try to get them on the show, so that people here in Philadelphia can talk to them too. It was a really great conference, and everybody that walked out of there was like, wow, there's a lot that we as journalists, because that was kind of the focus, what journalists can do to help preserve democracy. um, and there were a lot of really great ideas, which I will detail in the column I'm writing for the Hall Monitor newsletter. So please, be on the lookout for that. And if I can get permission to use the link to send out, on the, for the newsletter, I will definitely do that, because it's a conference that, everybody should check out.
Mhm. And speaking of democracy, a couple of things have happened in the last couple of days.
Mhm.
The first of which is happened today. District Attorney Larry Krasner has been impeached by the House of Representatives. Quick thoughts on that?
Well, they kind of figured they'd have to do it now, because once the House of Representatives changes hands, chances are that whole committee was going to go bye-bye. So that's kind of why they did it today. But the thing is, it's still got to get past the Senate. And there's not enough votes in the Senate, because you got to have 2/3 of the Senate to impeach someone. There's not enough votes in the Senate to do that. Um, I a lot of what we talked about at the symposium I went to with the Center for Democracy and Journalism talked about who gets to vote and whose vote gets to count. And basically, what the Pennsylvania legislature is saying to Philadelphians is that their vote doesn't count, or that they don't want it to count, at least in this particular case. So it's going to be interesting to see if this is a straw man for other things that the legislature wants to do.
Right. I agree. And then, before we go, we have a couple minutes left. We have some new entries into the mayor's race.
Mhm. Alan Dom made it official. He is running for mayor. And grocer Jeff Brown announced today that he too is running for mayor. Now, Alan Dom, we all know, because he's been a guest here on the show, and he was a former city councilman, and we've talked to him about what his plans would be if he became mayor. Now, Jeff Brown is a little more interesting, because basically all anyone heard from him, other than the fact that he is a grocer that has been, you know, that operates stores in some of the city's more notorious food deserts, is that he didn't like the soda. He didn't like the sweetened beverage tax. And we're going to find out what beyond that Brown brings to the table.
And and just so our viewers know, we're going to start our mayoral campaign coverage in earnest in January, because even though it has started, we want to give it a little breath between elections, and we have some city council things that we want to do before that. But we will be doing a lot of work on the mayor's race come January. So with that said, I'd like to thank our guests, Dan Nemiroff and Council Member-elect Jim Harry, for being with us. Lance, thank you as always for your excellent report. Denise, thank you so much for the Harity interview and talking about your column for this week. And we will see you all next week on Hall Monitor.